The view through the station's great glass dome usually offered the comfort of the Glade Concord's eternal sunset, a soft amber glow reflecting off the meticulously pruned crystalline ferns of the orbital garden. Now that light was gone. A wall of matte black hull plating, vast enough to swallow the horizon, slid across the stars like a closing eyelid. Herd Mother Leah tried to step toward the emergency terminal, but her legs refused. They didn't just stop. They locked, the calcium in her joints fusing in a sudden, involuntary biological seal that left her rooted to the mossy floor. White dust puffed from her antlers, the bone shedding its outer layer in a frantic, chemical attempt to vent the sheer volume of terror surging through her nervous system. Would you have found the strength to look away, or would you have let the shadow take you? Because Leah could only watch. The pruning shears in her left hand had been warm 4 cycles ago, the metal handle vibrating with the rhythmic hum of the station's life support as she trimmed the edges of the nectar lilies. Back then, the hardest decision in her world was whether to increase the humidity in the north sector by 2% or 3%. It was a mundane, peaceful existence, punctuated only by the soft chime of the sensor arrays every 47 minutes. A ghost. A tiny rhythmic blip in the deep range that the automated systems labeled as cosmic background radiation. The blip originated from the boot's void, a region of space so profoundly empty that it had served as the Concorde's primary philosophical metaphor for nothingness for 10,000 years, stretching nearly 330 million light-years across. The void was a pocket of the universe where the density of matter was so low that even a single stray atom was considered an event, making it the perfect, impossible graveyard for anything that didn't wish to be found. Leah had looked at the readings and assumed the hardware was simply tired. Hardware gets tired, so the sensors are pinging, and I'm looking at empty space and thinking the hardware is just tired, but that's what happens when you've lived in the quiet for too long. I need to be very clear that I followed the reporting guidelines. I documented the blips, but I also added a footnote suggesting they were likely a resonance echo from the station's own thrusters, a mistake that I now realize was born from a desperate, quiet need for the universe to remain as small as I believed it to be. I was composing a message to my youngest offspring about their upcoming blossoming ceremony when the blip occurred for the 12th time. I never finished that message. I was about to recommend a standard diagnostic on the ghost didn't just appear this time. It expanded. It wasn't radiation. It was a rhythmic, synchronized engine pulse, a heartbeat from 1,000,000 metal throats. The void, that vast expanse of nothing, was suddenly, violently full. It was as if the darkness itself had grown teeth. The station's communication array felt brittle under my touch as I opened a wideband channel, my fingers trembling against the cool interface. I broadcasted a standard greeting, my voice thick with the warmth I usually reserved for teaching the seedlings, though it was now laced with a desperate sharp edge of warning. I spoke of the Glade Concorde's protectors and the ancient treaties that kept this sector inviolate, hoping the mere mention of our allies would be enough to halt the encroaching dark. There was no reply, only a heavy, static-filled silence that seemed to vibrate through the floor and into the marrow of my locked bones. The human commander finally appeared on the secondary monitor, his face a map of deep lines and shadows that spoke of 1,000 sleepless rotations spent in the cold between stars. And now, as the amber sun was snuffed out by 1,000,000 tons of brutal matte black iron, I watched the commander's mouth curl into a small, sad smile. He didn't look like a conqueror. He looked like a man who had been running for a very long time and had finally decided he was no longer afraid of the distance. The visual confirmation of the fleet scale hit me again, a physical blow that made my lungs feel tight and thin, as if the oxygen in the garden had been sucked out into the vacuum above. My legs remained fused in that rigid biological freeze, a vestigial survival instinct that assumed if I didn't move, the predator would simply pass me by without noticing the heartbeat beneath the moss. The white dust from my antlers had settled on my tunic like fallen snow, a silent testament to the chemical storm of terror currently ravaging my internal systems. "Count your ships," he said, his voice a low, quiet rasp that carried no malice, only a terrifying sort of exhaustion that made me want to offer him a place to rest. "Now, count again." "The numbers won't match." He was right. The sensor array was screaming, trying to reconcile the physical presence of the ships with the data it was receiving, and the numbers were climbing into the millions, an armada that the Boots void had been hiding in its silent, lightless throat for centuries. I remember noticing a single nectar lily petal caught in the ventilation grate, vibrating in the ship's wake. It was bright yellow, a vivid splash of color against the gray metal, and I found myself wondering if the maintenance crew would finally clean that specific grate during the next cycle. I tried to ask about their intent, about the death they were bringing to our peaceful sector. The alarm went off. Not the regular one, the one behind the red glass that hadn't been touched in 300 years. He just shook his head at the sound. "Don't worry," he said, and for a second, I thought I heard a flicker of something like grim humor in the darkness. "The second fleet will arrive before the first one finishes dying." They weren't stopping. They weren't here to conquer our gardens or burn our libraries. They were just passing through, using our sun as a gravity well to slingshot an entire civilization toward a war we couldn't even imagine. The shadow passed eventually, leaving the garden in a cold, artificial twilight as the massive human engines flared with the light of miniature suns. On the sensor screen, the tiny ghost appeared again, right on schedule, at the 47-minute mark. It wasn't a glitch. I watched the green blip pulse on the dark glass, a rhythmic echo of a heartbeat that was no longer alone in the void.